Hey everybody, I hope you guys are doing okay today. I'm excited to read chapter 13 of Narcissus and Goldmund, hoping Narcissus makes a comeback because we haven't seen him for a long time. Just to recap chapter 12, Goldmund gets offered the master sculptor's legacy, basically, his business, his daughter's hand in marriage, and Goldmund just realized he was just bored with the whole thing, like bored with the acts that he's been putting on. One part that stuck out to me that I should have highlighted was the habitual signals. He said, as Catherine appeared at the window, smiling down to him out of her coarsened face, as he stretched out his hand to make the habitual signal, he said he remembered all the other times he had stood waiting in the same manner. With boring precision, he saw everything that would happen in the next few minutes. So it's like, he's like, this life is not for me. He went on further in the chapter to just hate basically everything the town represented, like just a pretty predictable life. So at the end of last chapter, he said goodbye to his landlords. And in this chapter, I guess he's about to go on his adventure. So I guess let's find out what happens to Goldmund. I'm sure he's going to get lost in the woods or something like that. So let's see. All right, chapter 13. During the first days of his new wandering life, in the first greedy whirl of regained freedom, Goldmund had to relearn to live the homeless, timeless life of the traveler. Obedient to no man, dependent only on weather and season, without a goal before them or a roof above them, owning nothing, open to every whim of fate, the homeless wanderers lead their childlike, brave, shabby existence. They are the sons of Adam, who was driven out of paradise, the brothers of the animals of innocence. Out of heaven's hand, they accept what is given them, from moment to moment: sun, rain, fog, snow, warmth, cold, comfort, and hardship. Time does not exist for them, and neither does history or ambition, or that bizarre idol called progress and evolution, in which the house owners believe so desperately. A wayfarer may be delicate or crude, artful or awkward, brave or cowardly. He is always a child at heart, living in the first day of creation, before the beginning of history of the world. His life always guided by a few simple instincts and needs. He may be intelligent or stupid. He may be deeply aware of the fleeting fragility of all things, of how pettily and fearfully each living creature carries its bit of warm blood through the glaciers of cosmic space. Or he may merely follow the commands of his poor stomach with childlike greed. He is always the opponent, the deadly enemy of the established proprietor, who hates him, despises him, or fears him, because he does not wish to be reminded that all existence is transitory, that life is constantly bolting, that merciless, icy death fills the cosmos all around. The childlike life of the wanderer, its mother origin, its turning away from law and mind, its openness and constant secret intimacy with death, had long since deeply impregnated and molded Goldmund's soul. But mind and will lived within him nevertheless. He was an artist, and this made his life rich and difficult. Any life expands and flowers only through division and contradiction. What are reason and sobriety without the knowledge of intoxication? What is sensuality without death standing behind it? What is love without the eternal mortal enmity of the sexes? Summer sank away, and autumn painfully. Goldmund struggled through the bitter months, wandered drunkenly through the sweet-smelling spring. Hastily, the seasons fled. Again and again, high summer sun sank down. Years passed. Goldmund seemed to have forgotten that there were other things on earth besides hunger and love, and the silent, eerie onrush of the seasons. He seemed completely drowned in the motherly, instinctive, basic world. But in his dreams, or his thought-filled moments of rest, overlooking the flowering or wilting valley, He was all eyes, an artist. He longed desperately to halt the gracefully drifting nonsense of life with his mind and transform it into sense. One day he found a companion. After his bloody adventure with Victor, he never traveled any way but by himself. Yet this man serendipitously attached himself to him, and he could not get rid of him for quite some time. This man was not like Victor. He was a pilgrim who had been to Rome, a still young man, wearing pilgrim's cloak and hat. His name was Robert, and his home was on Lake Constance. Robert was the son of an artisan. For a time he had attended the school of St. Gallus monks, and while still a boy, had made up his mind to go on a pilgrimage to Rome. It was his favorite ambition, and he seized the first opportunity to carry it out. This opportunity presented itself with the death of his father, in whose shop he had worked as a cabinet maker. The old man was hardly under the ground when Robert announced to his mother and sister that nothing could stop him from setting out on his pilgrimage to Rome, to satisfy his urge and atone for his and his father's sins. In vain the women complained, in vain they scolded. He remained stubborn, and instead of taking care of them, he set out on his journey without his mother's blessing and with the curses of his sister. He was driven mainly by a desire to travel, and to this was added a kind of superficial piety, an inclination to linger in the vicinity of churches and churchly rituals, a delight in masses, baptisms, burials, incense, and burning candles. He knew a little Latin, but his childish soul was not striving for learning, but rather for contemplation and quiet adoration in the shadows of church vaults. He had been a passionately zealous altar boy. Goldmund did not take him very seriously, but he liked him. He felt a slight kinship with his instinctive surrender to wandering and new places. At the time of his father's death, Robert had contentedly set out and had indeed reached Rome, where he had accepted the hospitality of cloisters and parsonages, looked at the mountains and at the south, and felt very happy. He had heard hundreds of masses, prayed at all famous holy places, received the sacraments, and breathed in more incense than his small youthful sins and those of his father required. He had stayed away for a year or more, and when he finally returned and entered his father's little house, he was hardly received like the prodigal son. His father had meantime taken over the duties and privileges of the household. He had hired and then married the industrious cabinet maker's assistant, and ruled over house and workshop so thoroughly that the returned pilgrim soon realized he was not needed. When he mentioned setting out on new travels, no one asked him to stay. He did not take it too much to heart. His mother gave him a few pennies, and again he put on a pilgrim's clothes and set out without a goal, straight through the empire, a half-priestly vagrant. Copper souvenir coins from well-known pilgrim shrines and blessed rosaries tinkled around his body. He met Goldmund, wandered with him for a day, exchanged wayfarer's memories with him, disappeared in the next small town, reappeared here and there, and finally stayed with him, an amiable, dependable traveling companion. Goldmund pleased him greatly. He wooed his favor with small services, admired his knowledge, his audacity, his mind, and loved his health, strength, and frankness. They got used to each other, and Goldmund was also easy to get along with. There was only one thing he would not tolerate: when his melancholy and brooding mood seized him. He remained stubbornly silent and ignored the other man as though he did not exist. During these moods, one could neither chat nor ask questions nor console Goldmund. One had to let him be and remain silent. Robert was not long in learning this. He had noticed that Goldmund knew a lot of Latin verses and songs by heart. He had heard him explain the stone figures outside the portals of a cathedral, had seen him draw life-size figures on an empty wall in rapid, bold strokes, and he thought his companion was a favorite of God and practically a magician. Robert also saw that Goldmund was a favorite of women and could obtain their favors with a glance and a smile. Though he liked this less well, still he had to admire him for it. One day their journey was interrupted in an unexpected manner. They were approaching a village when they were received by a small group of peasants, armed with cudgels, poles, and flails. Far From far off, the leader shouted to them that they should turn around at once and never come back, that they should run like the devil or else they'd be beaten to death. Goldmund stopped and wished to know what this was all about. The reply was a stone against his chest. He turned to Robert, but Robert had already started running. The peasants advanced threateningly, and Goldmund had no choice but to follow his fleeing companion. Trembling, Robert waited for him under a crucifix in the middle of a field. "You ran like a hero," laughed Goldmund. "But what do those pigs have in their thick heads? Is there a war on? To place armed sentinels outside their rotten little town, refusing to let people in. I wonder what it all means." Robert didn't know either, but certain experiences in an isolated farmhouse in the next morning made them guess the secret. The farm, which consisted of a hut, a stable, and a barn, surrounded by a green crop, with high grass and many fruit trees, lay strangely still and asleep. There were no voices, no footfalls, no children screaming, no scythes being sharpened, not a sound. In the courtyard, a cow stood in the grass, lowing furiously. Is that like a sound that cows make? I don't know cow sounds. Like a, what is that lowing sound, I wonder? I lost my spot. Oh, here. It was obviously time to milk her. Okay. They stepped up to the door, knocked, received no answer, walked into the stable. It was open and abandoned. They went into the barn. On its straw roof, light green moss glistened in the sun, but they didn't find a soul there either. They walked back to the house, astonished and depressed by the deserted homestead. Several times they hammered against the door with their fists, no answer. Goldmund tried to open it. To his surprise, he found it unlocked, and he pushed and entered the pitch-dark room. "God bless you," he called loudly. "Nobody home?" The hut remained silent. Robert stayed outside. Impelled by curiosity, Goldmund advanced further. There was a bad smell in the hut, a strange, disgusting smell. The hearth was full of ash. He blew into it. Sparks still gleamed at the bottom under charred logs. Then he noticed someone sitting in the half-light beside the hearth. Someone was sitting there in an armchair, asleep. It looked like an old woman. Calling did no good. The house seemed to be under a spell. With a friendly tap, he touched the seated woman on the shoulder, but she did not stir, and he saw that she was getting in a cobweb, with threads running from her hair to her chin. "She is dead," he thought with a slight shudder. To make sure, he tried to revive the fire, scratched and blew until a flame shot up, and he was able to light a long piece of kindling. He held it up to the woman and saw a blue-black cadaver's face under her gray hair, one eye still open, staring, empty and leaden. The woman had died sitting in the chair. Well, she was beyond help. With the burning stick in his hand, Goldmund searched further. In the same room, across the threshold to a back room, he found another corpse. A boy, perhaps 8 or 9, with a swollen, disfigured face, dressed only in a shirt. I wonder if there's like a plague or something going on. That might be what's happening. He lay with his belly across the doorsill, both hands clenched in firm, furious little fists. The second one, thought Goldmund. As though in a hideous dream, he walked back into the back room. There, the shutters were open, the daylight pouring in. Carefully, he extinguished his torch and ground the sparks out on the floor. You know those old ladies who kind of sit by their window all day and just look out? I might be turning into that old lady who sits by her window and just sees what the neighbors are doing. There were 3 beds in the back room. One was empty, and the straw peeked out from under coarse gray sheets. In the second bed, another person, a bearded man, lay stiffly on his back, his head bent backward and his chin and beard pointing at the ceiling. It was probably the farmer. His haggard face shimmered faintly in unfamiliar colors of death, one arm dangling to the floor, where an earthen water jug had been pushed over. The water had run out and had not been completely absorbed by the floor. It had run into a hollow and made a small puddle. In the second bed, completely entangled in sheets and blanket, lay a big, husky woman. Her face was pressed into the bed, and coarse, straw-blonde hair glistened in the bright light. With her, wrapped around her, as though caught and throttled in the tousled linen, lay a half-grown girl, as straw-blonde as she, with gray-blue stains in her dead face. Goldmund's eyes traveled from corpse to corpse. The girl's face was already terribly disfigured, but he could see something of her helpless horror of death. In the neck and hair of the mother, who had dug herself so deeply into the bed, one could read rage, fear, and a passionate desire to flee, especially in the wild hair, which could not resign itself to dying. The farmer's face showed stubbornness and held in pain. He had died a hard death, but his bearded chin rose steeply, rigidly, into the air, like that of a warrior lying on the battlefield. His quiet, taut, stubbornly controlled posture was beautiful. It had probably not been a petty, cowardly man who had received death in this manner. Most touching was the little corpse of the boy lying on its belly across the threshold. The face told nothing, but the posture across the threshold and clenched child's fists told a great deal. Incomprehensible, suffering, unavailing struggle against unheard of pain. Beside his head, a cat hole had been sawed into the door. Goldmund examined everything attentively. The sights in this hut were ghastly, and the stench of the corpses dreadful. Still, it all held a deep attraction for him. Everything spoke of greatness, of fate. It was real, uncompromising. Something about it stirred his heart and penetrated his soul. Goldmund had begun calling him from outside, with impatience and fear. Goldmund was fond of Robert, but at this moment he thought how petty and cheap a living person could be in his childish fear and curiosity, compared to the nobility of the dead. He did not answer Robert's call. He gave himself completely to the sight of the dead, with that strange mixture of heartfelt compassion and cold observation of the artist. He took in all of the details, the sprawled out figures, their heads and hands, the patterns in which they had frozen. How still it was in the spellbound hut, and what a strange, terrible smell. How sad and ghost-like was this small home, with the remains of the hearth fire still glowing, inhabited by corpses, completely filled with death, penetrated by death. Soon the flesh would fall off these quiet faces. Rats would eat the bodies. What other people performed in the privacy of their coffins, in the graves, well hidden and invisible, the last and poorest performance, this falling apart and decaying, was performed here at home by 5 people in their rooms in broad daylight, behind an unlocked door. Thoughtlessly, shamelessly, vulnerably. Goldmund had seen many corpses, but never an example like this of the merciless workings of death. Deeply he studied it. Finally, Robert's yelling outside the house began to disturb him, and he went out. His companion looked at him with fright. "What happened?" he asked in a low, fear-strangled voice. "Is there anyone in the house?" "Oh, and what eyes you have. Say something." It reminded me of "Oh, what eyes you have." Like the story with the witch, not the witch, with the wolf that dressed up like a grandma or something, like, "What beautiful something you have." Anyway, Goldmund measured him coolly. "Go in and take a look. This is a strange farmhouse, all right? Afterward, we'll milk the beautiful cow over there. Go ahead." Hesitantly, Robert entered the hut, discovered the old woman sitting at the hearth, and let out a loud scream when he realized that she was dead. As he came out, he was wide-eyed with fright. "For heaven's sake, a dead woman is sitting by the hearth. How can it be? Why isn't anyone with her? Why don't they bury her? Oh God, she's begun to smell." Goldmund smiled. I think he smiled too because he's already gone through all that. And I think that's why I kind of smiled just then too. Like, we already went through the process of like, oh God, this is crazy stuff, you know? So then to see someone else do it. You're a great hero, Robert, but you came back out too fast. A dead old woman sitting in a chair like that is indeed a strange sight. But if you'd walked a few steps farther, you'd see something stranger still. There are 5 corpses, Robert. 3 in bed, a dead boy lying across the threshold, and the old woman. They're all dead, the entire family, the whole household is gone. That's why nobody milked the cow. Horrified, Robert stared at him and suddenly cried in a choking voice. Now I understand why the peasants didn't want to let us into their village yesterday. Oh God, now it's all clear to me. The plague. Oh, I was right. By my poor soul, it's the plague, Goldmund. And you've stayed in there all this time. Maybe you've even touched the corpses. Get away, don't come near me. I'm sure you're infected. I'm sorry, Goldmund, but I must go. I can't stay with you. He turned to run, but was held back by his pilgrim's cloak. Goldmund looked at him sternly, with silent reprimand, and mercilessly held on to the man who pulled and tugged. My dear little boy, he said in a friendly, ironic tone, you're more intelligent than one might think. You're probably right. It doesn't say we'll. Well, we'll find out in the next farm or village. Yes, it's probably the plague. We'll see if we escape it safe and sound. But, little Robert, I can't let you run away now. Look, I have a soft heart, much too soft. And when I think that you might have contaminated yourself in there, I cannot let you run off to lie down somewhere in a field and die all alone, with no one to close your eyes and dig you a grave and throw a bit of earth over you. No, dear friend, that would be too sad to bear. Listen then, and pay careful attention to what I'm saying, because I'm not going to say it twice. We two are in the same danger. It can hit you or it can hit me. Therefore, we're staying together. We'll either perish together or escape this cursed plague together. If you fall ill and die, I'll bury you. That's a promise. And if I die, then you do as you please. You can bury me or run off. I don't care. Oh, that's something I would say. But until then, my friend, no one runs off. Remember that. We need each other. And now shut your trap. Another thing I would say. I don't want to hear another word. Now go and find a bucket somewhere in the stable so that we can milk the cow. They did this, and from that moment on, Goldmund commanded and Robert obeyed, and both fared well for it. Robert made no more attempts to flee. He only said soothingly, "You frightened me for a moment. I didn't like your face when you came out of that house of death. I thought you had caught the plague. And even if it isn't the plague, your face has changed completely. Was it so terrible what you saw in there?" "It was not terrible," Goldmund said slowly. "I saw nothing in there that does not await you and me and everybody, even if we don't catch the plague." As they wandered on, the Black Death was everywhere they went, reigning over the land. Some villages do not let strangers in. Others let them walk unhindered through every street. Many farms stood deserted. Many unburied corpses lay rotting in the fields and in the houses. Unmilked cows lowed and starved in stables. Other livestock ran wild in the fields. They milked and fed many a cow and goat. They killed and roasted many a goatlet or piglet at the edge of the forest, and drank wine and cider in many a masterless cellar. They had a good life. There was abundance everywhere, but it tasted only half good to them. Robert lived in constant fear of the disease, and he felt sick at the sight of corpses. Often he was completely beside himself with fear. Again and again he thought that he had caught the plague, and held his head and hands in the smoke of their campfire for a long time, for this was supposed to be a preventative, and felt his body, even in his sleep, to see if bumps were forming on his legs or in his armpits. Goldmund often scolded and made fun of him. He did not share his fear or his disgust. Fascinated and oppressed, he walked through the stricken country, attracted by the sight of the great death, his soul filled with the autumn, his heart heavy with the song of the mowing scythe. Sometimes the image of the universal mother would appear to him, a pale, gigantic face with Medusa eyes and a smile thick with suffering and death. One day they came to a small town that was heavily fortified. Outside the gates, defensive ramparts ran house high around the entire city wall, but there was no sentinel standing up there or at the wide open gates. Robert refused to enter the town, and he implored his companion not to go in either. Just then, a bell tolled. A priest came out of the city gates, a cross in his hands, and behind him came 3 carts, 2 drawn by horses and 1 by a pair of oxen. The carts were piled high with corpses. A couple of men in strange coats, their faces shrouded in hoods, ran alongside and spurred the animals on. Robert disappeared, white-faced. Goldmund followed the death carts at a short distance. They advanced a few hundred steps farther. There was no cemetery. A hole had been dug in the middle of the deserted heath, only 3 spades deep, but as vast as a hall. Goldmund stood and looked on as the men pulled the corpses from the carts with staffs and boat hooks and tossed them into the vast hole. He saw the murmuring priest swing his cross over them and walk away, saw the men light huge fires all around the flat grave and suddenly creep back into the city. No one had tried to throw any earth over the pit. Goldmund looked in. 50 or more persons lay there, piled one on top of the other, many of them naked, stiff and accusing. An arm or a leg rose in the air. A shirt fluttered timidly in the wind. When he came back, Robert begged him almost on his knees to flee the place. He had good reason to beg, for he saw Goldmund's absent look at the absorption in and concentration on horror, that dreadful curiosity that had become all too familiar. He was not able to hold his friend back. Alone, Goldmund walked into the town. He walked through the unguarded gates, and at the echo of his steps, many towns and gates rose up in his memory. He remembered how he had walked through them, how he had been received by screaming children, playing boys, quarreling women, and the hammering of a forge, the crystal sound of the anvil, the rattling of carts, and many other sounds, delicate and coarse, all braided together as though into a web that bore witness to many forms of human labor, joy, bustle, and communication. Here, under this yellow gate, in this empty street, nothing echoed. No one laughed. No one cried. Everything lay frozen in deathly silence, cut by the overloud, almost noisy chatter of a running well. Behind an open window, he saw a baker amid his loaves and rolls. Goldmund pointed to a roll. The baker carefully handed it out to him on a long baking shovel, waited for Goldmund to place money into the shovel, and angrily, without cursing, closed his little window when the stranger bit into the roll and walked off without paying. Before the windows of a pretty house stood a row of earthen jars in which flowers had once bloomed. Now wilted leaves hung down over scraps of pottery. From another house came the sound of sobbing, the misery of children's voices crying. In the next street, Goldmund saw a pretty girl standing behind an upper floor window, combing her hair. He watched her until she felt his eyes and looked down blushing, and when he gave her a friendly smile, slowly a faint smile spread over her blushing face. Here comes Goldmund, Mr. Player. Wherever he goes, plague or not, he's going to find a woman. I mean, what else you going to do, right? Soon through combing, he called up, smiling. She leaned her light face out of the darkness of the window. Not sick yet? He asked, and she shook her head. Then leave this dirty city of death with me. We'll go into the woods and live a good life. Her eyes asked questions. Don't think it over too long. I mean it, Goldmund called up to her. Are you with your father and mother, or are you in the service of strangers? Strangers, I see. Come along then, dear child. Let the old people die. We are young and healthy and want to have a bit of fun while there's still time. Come along, little brown hair. I mean it. She gave him a probing look, hesitant and surprised. Slowly he walked on, strolled through a deserted street and through another. Slowly he came back. The girl was still at the window, leaning forward, glad to see him return. She waved to him. Slowly he walked on, and soon she came running after him, caught up with him before the gates, a small bundle in her hand, a red handkerchief tied around her head. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lene." "I'll go with you." "Oh, it's so horrible here in the city. Everybody's dying. Let's leave, let's leave." Not far from the gates, Robert was crouching moodily on the ground. When Goldmund appeared, he jumped to his feet and stared when he caught sight of the girl. This time he did not give in at once. He whined and made a scene. How could a man bring a person with him from that cursed plague hole and impose her company on his companion? It was not only crazy, it was tempting God. He, Robert, was not going to stay with him any longer. His patience had come to an end. Goldmund let him curse and lament until he found nothing more to say. "There," he said, "now you've sung your song. Now you'll come with us and be glad that we have such pretty company. Her name is Lene, and she stays with me. But I want to do you a favor too, Robert. Listen, for a while we live in peace and health and stay away from the plague. We'll find a nice place for ourselves, an empty hut, or we'll build one, and I'll be the head of the household, and Lene will be the mistress, and you'll be our friend and live with us. Our life is going to be a little pleasant and friendly now, all right?" Oh, yes, Robert was delighted. I think Robert's going to die. I don't know. I feel like he's just going to meet her friend and he's going to die. That's my guess. As long as no one asked him to shake Lene's hand or touch her clothes. "No," said Goldmund. "No one will ask him to. In fact, it was strictly forbidden to touch Lene, even with a finger. Don't you dare." All three walked on, first in silence. Then gradually the girl began to talk. How happy she was to see sky and trees and meadows again. It had been so gruesome in the plague-stricken city, more horrible than she could tell. And she began to clear her heart of all the sad, horrible things she had seen. She told so many awful stories. The little town must have been hell. One or two of the doctors had died. The other only looked after the rich. In many houses the dead lay rotting because nobody came to take them away. In other houses looters stole, pillaged, and hoarded. Often they pulled the sick from their beds, threw them into the death carts with the corpses, and down to the pit of the dead. Many a horror tale she had to tell, and no one interrupted her. Robert listened with voluptuous terror, Goldmund silent and unruffled, letting the horrors pour out and making no comment. What was there to say? Finally, Lene grew tired. The steam dried up. She was out of words. Goldmund began to walk more slowly. Softly he began to sing, a song of many couplets, and with each couplet his voice grew fuller. Lene began to smile. Robert listened, delighted and deeply surprised. Never before had he heard Goldmund sing. He could do everything, this Goldmund. There he was singing, strange man. He sang well. His voice was pure, though muffled. At the second song, Lene was humming with him, and soon she joined in with full voice. Evening was coming on. Black forests rose up far over the heath, and behind them low blue mountains, which grew bluer and bluer as though from within. Now gay, now solemn, their song followed the rhythm of their steps. "You're in such a good mood today," said Robert. "Of course I'm in a good mood today. I found such a pretty love." "Oh, Lene, how nice that the ghouls left you behind for me. Tomorrow we'll find a little house where we'll have a good life and be happy to have flesh and bones still together." "Lene, did you ever see those fat mushrooms in the woods in autumn? The edible ones that the snails love?" "Oh, yes," she laughed. "I've seen lots of them." "Your hair is that same mushroom brown, Lene. and it smells just as good. Shall we sing another song, or are you hungry? I still have a few things in my satchel." The next day, they found what they were looking for. A log cabin in a small birch forest. Okay, now I think Lene's gonna die too, because she's just too happy. I think in the story the author doesn't want Goldmund to. I don't know. I just have a feeling they're both gonna die, but we'll find out. Perhaps some woodcutters had built it. It stood empty, and the door was soon broken open. Robert agreed that the door was a good hut and a healthy region. On the road, they had met stray goats and had taken a fine one along with them. "Wall, Robert," said Goldmund, "although you're no carpenter, you were once a cabinet maker. We're going to live here. You must build us a partition for our castle, to make 2 rooms, one for Lene and me, and one for you and the goat. We don't have very much left to eat. Today we must be satisfied with goat's milk, no matter how little there is. You'll build a wall, and we'll make up beds for all of us. Tomorrow I'll go look for food." Immediately everybody set to work. Goldmund and Lene went to find straw, fern, and moss for their sleeping places, and Robert sharpened his knife on a piece of flint to cut small birch posts to make a wall. But he could not finish it in one day, and that evening he went outside to sleep in the open. Goldmund had found a sweet playmate in Lene, shy and inexperienced, but deeply loving. Gently, he took her to his bosom and lay awake for a long time, listening to her heart, long after she had fallen asleep, tired and satiated. He smelled her brown hair, nestled close to her, all the while thinking of the vast, flat pit into which the hooded devils had dumped their carts of corpses. Life was beautiful, beautiful and fleeting as happiness. Youth was beautiful and wilted fast. The partition of the hut was very pretty. All 3 worked at it finally. Robert wanted to show what he could do and eagerly talked about all the things he wanted to build. If only he had a planing bench and tools, a straight edge and nails. But he had only his knife and his hands, and had to be satisfied with cutting a dozen small birch posts and building a coarse, sturdy fence in the hut. But he decreed the openings had to be filled in with plaited juniper. That took time, but it became gay and pretty. Everybody helped. In between, Lene went to gather berries and to look after the goat, and Goldmund scoured the region for food, explored the neighborhood, and came back with a few little things. The region seemed uninhabited. Robert was especially pleased about that. They were safe from contamination as well as from quarrels, but it had one disadvantage. There was very little to eat. They found an abandoned peasant hut not far away, but without corpses this time, and Goldmund proposed to move to the hut rather than stay in the log cabin. But Robert shudderingly refused. He didn't like to see Goldmund enter the empty house, and every piece he brought over had first to be smoked and washed before Robert touched it. Goldmund didn't find much: 2 posts, a milk pail, a few pieces of crockery, a hatchet, but one day he caught 2 stray chickens in the fields. Lene was in love and happy. All 3 enjoyed improving their small home, making it a little prettier each day. They had no bread, but they took another goat into service and also found a small field of turnips. The days passed. The wall was finished. The beds were improved. They built a hearth. The brook was not far and had a clear, sweet water. They often sang as they worked. I feel like early in the book they talked about not having bread. Like somebody didn't have bread to give him. One day, as they sat together drinking their milk and praising their settled life, Lene said suddenly in a dreamy tone, "But what will we do when winter comes?" No one answered. Robert laughed. Goldmund stared strangely ahead of him. Eventually, Lene noticed that neither one of them thought of winter, that neither seriously thought of remaining such a long time in the same place, that this home was no home, that she was among wayfarers. She hung her head. She just figured out what she got herself into, huh? Then Goldmund said, playfully and encouragingly, as though to a child, "You're a peasant's daughter, Lene. Peasants always worry. Don't be afraid. You'll find your way back home once this plague period is over. It can't last forever. Then you'll go back to your parents or to whomever is still alive, or you'll return to the city and earn your bread as a maid. But now it's still summer. Ooh, wasn't she in love with him? And he's like, you can go back to your house now? Death is rampant throughout the region, but here it is pretty. And we live well. That's why we can stay here for as long or as short as the time as we like. And afterwards, Lene asked violently, afterward, is it all over? You go away? What about me? Goldmund caught her braid and pulled at it softly. Silly little girl, he said. Have you already forgotten the ghouls and the abandoned houses and the big hole outside the gates where the fires burn? You should be happy not to be lying in that hole with the rain falling on your little nightshirt. Think of what you escaped. Be glad that your dear life is still in your veins, that you can still laugh and sing. She was still not satisfied. I wouldn't be satisfied with that answer too. Like, just be happy you're alive, and then when it gets cold, I'm gonna ditch you, and you can go figure it out in your town. But I don't want to go away again, she complained. Nor do I want to let you go. How can one be happy when one knows that soon all will be finished and over with? Once more Goldmund answered her, in a friendly tone, but with a hidden threat in his voice. About that, little Lene. The wise men and saints have racked their brains. There is no lasting happiness. If what we have now is not good enough for you, if it no longer pleases you, then I'll set fire to this hut this very minute, and each of us can go his way. Let things be as they are, Lene. We've talked enough. Ooh, She gave in. That's where they left it. But a shadow had fallen over her joy. It would have fallen over mine too. Dang, Goldmund is a... I'm not liking Goldmund right now. All right, well, we'll read chapter 14 next time. Thank you for listening. Bye.